All right, so nano calcium reactors. I've been running calcium reactor for about 2.5 years. I started with kalkwasser. Loved it. I could have gone two-part, but I like the idea of putting in equal alkalinity and calcium and keeping the pH up. And I had an old Reef Keeper Lite with a pH probe, so I could control, if there was an overdose, it would shut it down with the pH probe in there. So after kalkwasser couldn't keep my pH above 7, I looked into two-parter calcium reactors. And the two-part looked easy, a little cheaper, but I'd already been spoiled with only having to put one solution into the tank. And I was up for the challenge, maybe if there was a challenge, and the gadget guy, so calcium reactor I went. Now, on the left, you'll see the AquaMaxx Nano calcium reactor. On the right, you got the GEO's Reef 510 nano reactor. And in the back in the middle there, you have an Avast media reactor, which I built with the home kit, and then I use that as my secondary chamber. So obviously I chose calcium reactor. The pros was that, the media inside lasted for 1.5 years on my first run with that AquaMaxx on the left. The CO2, I have a 5-pound tank. That's the same tank I used. I had a cheap, not a Milwaukee, but it was a Planet Tank one, a cheap Planet Tank regulator, which worked pretty good with a pinch valve. There was an adjustment about every week with a Vertex needle valve, not too bad. This GLA regulator, when I got this 55 set up, it's just awesome. The needles are dead on. The bubble chamber there, yeah. So you can see that nylon knob on the bottom of the bubble counter. That thing is buttery smooth, and super fine adjustments are way easy. And that's really where this thing shines, is the fact that I can adjust my bubble rate really, really well. It's still tiny movements, but the hardest part about the cheaper regulators, they work great, was that I kind of had to work on my effluent flow more. I could set my bubble rate, but then I had to change my flow. This one I can change my bubble rate because I can actually adjust it. It's got a fine enough adjustment. I use the pH controller, so it's got a solenoid on there to shut it off if the pH gets too low. And so it's just a good regulator. I would definitely recommend it. It costs a little more, but it just runs really mechanically smooth. It was a tie between this and the carbon doser. The carbon doser was like $100 more. And I really don't regret getting this. The carbon doser would be nice, but I can manually set my bubbles on this. I don't need the carbon doser to do it, where I couldn't manually set it on the $100 ones. So that was good. So when the Kamoer came out, as you can see in the video title, I went ahead and got it. I got it fairly early. I've had it for 3 or 4 months now. And as a guy who's been running a calcium reactor for a couple of years, I wouldn't want to do it without it. It was fine running this guy with the Vertex needle valve on the effluent flow. I just had to watch the drips, and if they changed a little bit, I adjust them once a week. So there was a once a week maintenance. I did that for 1.5 years. It was fine. It never swung it out of the way, because a small change on a calcium reactor isn't a big change, because it's 24 hours a day it's going. So you test your parameters every week, and it's fine. And it would dial in after a while, and not change as much. But with this, and you put more corals in the tank, you move things around, you change things, you just turn the knob, And so I set my bubble rate, I make sure it's in range, and then I turn the knob to where I want it, and it runs quiet and it runs good. So really, this really is a great thing for calcium reactors. I'm resetting my pH because I'm switching over to the GEO reactor today. And so before we go into comparing the two, let's take a look at what kind of bioload we're looking at here. So this is my 55-gallon mixed reef, and I got the blues on with just a simple filter. But we've got, that's a leather in the back. big ORA stellifora, some LPS, a couple zoas, bunch of digis on the bottom there, acros, millies, Australian delicate. So and so, you know, hydrophora, echinata, some plating stuff. So pretty decent coral load. And the green star pops in the middle. Okay, and then on top of that, let me get my little, love this guy, the old AquaMaxx flashlight. On top of that, I've got a frag rack down here with about 75 frags in it, of various sorts, soaking up alkalinity too. So it's almost like, you know, a little more than a 55. So you got a 55 with a decent load, and then you got a sump, which would be the equivalent of, you know, a heavy 15-gallon, 20-gallon Pico. So the demand is decent for what it is. So the AquaMaxx Nano is rated at 50 gallons, and I started on a 30-gallon BioCube, and it did great. I was still adding kalkwasser because I had it set up, and it was keeping the pH down, but this thing handled it. So when I moved over to the 55, I brought this setup, and you know, started with some old corals, but a bunch of frags, and as these things grew out, as you can see, they're growing out. It was just getting harder and harder to keep up. You know, it wanted 2 to 3 drops a second. It gave an advised range between 6.4 pH and 6.9 pH. Don't go below 6.4. And so I had to keep going down, 6.6, 6.5, 6.4. So I stopped at 6.4. I'd set my apex to go between 6.35 and 6.45, so I can average 6.4. And a lot of times the bubble counter would keep it right at 6.4. It wouldn't have to turn on and off, and that's one reason I love that regulator also. But and then I was cranking up the Kamoer. I was at 25 milliliters an hour, then 30, then 40, then 45, then 50, then 55, then so now I'm up to 60, and I want to run it at 8.5 DKH, and I'm holding it like 7.2. And one reason that I'm holding now is because I just moved Rico's Nano Challenge, the Pico tank. You know, this big rock right here of LPS, that all came over. Those zoas came over. So I just put another big chunk of rock in there from another tank in there. And I just fragged that green Monopora. There's 10 frags of that down there. That's Atosa. There's 10 frags of that. So, you know, just a lot more demand. And so, you know, 2-3 drops a second. No, it was steady stream coming out the effluent. So I'm like, okay, I'm pretty much maxing this thing out. It's barely keeping me over 7. I'm gonna have to do something about it. In comes the GEO. Now, good reviews. A little pricey. I did find this one for $229, which is awesome. Shipping was like $250. I did have a problem where I dropped it. You know, get your new thing, drop it. I got some epoxy here, some epoxy here. The glue that they used was not like regular PVC cement. It was more like some other type of glue. I can't really knock them for that necessarily. You know, this plumbing part was well made. I don't think it was glued together as well as I liked it. But that being said, you're paying for the cast acrylic, and that seems to be good. And you know, the John Geist fittings, you're paying for all those. You're paying for the pump. You know, so and you know, and the unions and things like that. You know, so there's a lot of good stuff going on here. And so I think I'll be happy with it. And again, if I wouldn't have dropped it, it wouldn't have broke. So otherwise, obviously it holds a ton more media. It's rated up to 125. You got people saying it'll run, you know, 220 tanks and stuff like that. We'll see. You know, Rico just did a video on his calcium reactor where, you know, he got one that could hold up to 2,000 gallons because he's planning on pushing his 500 to huge colonies. You know, I don't know if I could get as good as Rico, but I'd like, you know, those colonies to reach up and fill up all those empty spaces. So there's just no way that this guy was going to do it, even though he's rated for it. You're asking a lot when you're asking for large, you know, SPS colonies. So, so this is going in today. I do like to run my secondary chamber, just any, you know, I just got the cheapest build your own kit from Avast. It's great, works fine. Even with this guy, over 6 months, it went from there down to there. So it's actually using up some of that media, using up some of that low pH at 6.4. It's melting the stuff, making the solution more concentrated. But again, it just couldn't concentrate off of that much media, you know, and where on my 30 gallon, you know, from here to halfway took a year and a half. On this tank, from here to here took about 4 months. And so that, you know, kind of blew my mind a little bit, made me realize, you know, what was going on, and I was soaking it up. So 5 pounds of media shouldn't be a problem, should have room to grow. If I ever upgrade systems, you know, this could go with it. You know, I don't have a ton of space. This is a 36-inch cabinet. I've got everything I want in here and more. Obviously, there's my control board. I love having my ATO in there. You know, I got a whole frag system, and then there's my little shelf to put things on. One media reactor. I do run AquaForest component A, B, and C with the calcium reactor. Those are all the trace elements and metals and everything like that. So, and it says great for calcium reactors. So I can do, like, you know, the Red Sea A, B, and the component and all that, but you just, you know, do the AquaForest A, B, and C, and that's everything that's not the, and this stuff's pretty cheap too. I just put in 10 milliliters once a week. That stuff's great. And then I do their daily, you know, suggested 4-pack amino acids, builder, vitamins, you know, that's every other day. And I do, like, every 3 days, I do like reef roids and reef chili, because I want to be able to feed my corals a lot. So I want a lot of filtration. And then, so to recap that, I put just 1 cc of no-pox a day. I'm not trying to carbon ghost the tank, but I am trying to grow bacteria. So instead of using their probiotic salt, I'm using just some no-pox, so I don't have to buy their expensive salt. I put some carbon in. It's enough to keep the bacteria strong, and they get pulled out here. And the nicest thing about the AquaForest is you can see ZEO mix on the bottom, mixed in with my carbon, and GFO on top. See it bubbling? So all my media is in one BRS tube, and so it allows me the room, obviously, to squeeze this honker in here. So I'm just going to start it off at like 6.8, you know, calibrate my probe, get it in there. But I have a feeling that this will last. Not much room. I'm going to try and put my second chamber in there. I do like running it, but it's not necessary, you know. If I only have room for this guy, that's what I need to do, you know, because, you know, this guy's not doing anymore. But absolutely recommend the AquaMaxx Nano. These were a little harder to find, but they were like $100, $150 maybe. Great little calcium reactor, works great, 30 to 50 gallons. You know, get you a little 5-pound CO2 tank, a cheap regulator, and a pinch valve, and you're done. You know, that'll do you. And then you won't have to touch your dosing. You just monitor your effluent. You won't have to touch your dosing for months and months and months. So this guy, you know, should last a while. We'll see how he does, but if you know, if that guy's any indication, then this should be good. So we'll give you an update down the road on how the GEO's doing as I continue to frag, and down below, I plan on getting a AI Prime to replace that Zet light. That $50 Zet light's working great, but I want to get a little more light down there, and you know, get these colonies huge and work the tank and get frags off of there, you know, and do that. So that's the difference between the two. These are the only 2 nano reactors that I'm aware of, and you know, the other one that was in the running was the AquaMaxx, makes like 100-gallon one. So that was also in the running, but you know, a lot of people got the big ones, but not many people are putting on small tanks. I love them. I'm going to keep running them as long as, you know, it's not cost prohibitive. And once it's set up, and it's nice. So, all right, y'all take it easy.